What content does is it diverts our attention from the fear of that sales process and allows us to relax. You know, the most powerful 4 words in the English language are once upon a time. We relax. We are ready to listen and to share and to build a relationship. And that's what content marketing does on LinkedIn and elsewhere. But on LinkedIn, it's most powerful if you're B2B.
Welcome to the B2B Digital Marketer Podcast, a podcast helping you to end your struggle with digital marketing, helping you to pave a new and better path to target and capture your ideal customer. Each week, we teach you how insiders and experts debunk the dreary and become engines of innovation. Now, here's your host, Jim Rembach.
Hey, B2B DM gang. I am excited today because I'm going to get the opportunity to share with you the results of a case study that I did with content marketing on LinkedIn, which resulted in a 726.93% improvement in engagement. So make sure you listen all the way through to this particular episode because it's going to be vitally important. Because Dr. Pelè is with me, and he's going to share a little bit about LinkedIn and the impact that you can have, quite frankly, to sales and revenue on LinkedIn. Dr. Pelè, welcome.
How are you, Jim? It's a pleasure to be here with you.
It is. And it's just kind of funny because I've actually known Pelè for many years. And so he was actually on my podcast a couple of times, the Fast Leader Show, of which I have run for so many years. And now I get to bring him on the B2B Digital Marketer podcast. So I'm excited. So based on that, we have this, I don't want to say dichotomy, but we have this, colorful interest in regards to customer experience, leadership, and digital marketing. So if you could kind of give the listeners to the B2B Digital Marketer podcast a little bit of context on who you are and your experience.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Jim. I have to also add that not only have we known each other for a while, you have actually visited my house here in Austin and eaten African soup with me and my wife. So we are brothers, okay? We crossed the threshold when you did that. No, it's a pleasure to be here. From a sense of context, I think anyone who's listening to this show should be asking themselves the question of ROI, return on investment. When you think about all the time you spend on social media, all the time you spend on your website, on LinkedIn, and so on and so forth, how many relationships are you building? How far is the reach of your content that you're sharing? How far is it actually going? And what results are you getting? I mean, literally, can you count these things? If you can, and it's positive, awesome. But if you can't count these things, or you don't even know where to start, then I'm sorry, but I have to use the analogy I like to share, which is that's a strategy of hope, where you do a bunch of hard work and you hope it works, right? Or maybe you're driving your car, you're going forward, but you have blindfolds on, so you can't see what's working and what's not. So I think the question of ROI is the critical question we all need to be asking in B2B.
Most definitely. And let's put this in context. This doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a solopreneur, if you work within an organization and you're, a sales, business development rep, or even a marketing, demand gen, this applies to everyone. And so I refer to it, what you're saying is my digital activity ROI. So, because we have all kinds of activity that we're doing digital. In the B2B world, it's significantly more now today than it was pre-COVID. So what is your digital activity ROI? And we actually put together a digital activity assessment. Then we'll make sure that we make it available on your show notes page. And you can even go to b2bdm.com and do a search for assessment, and you'll be able to find it. And what it is, it's a really quick 10-question survey, assessment, quiz, whatever you want to call it, to give you an understanding of some of the things that you may be missing that are needed today. So, and I think part of that missing piece and what we're talking about is people understanding content management, content selection, content promotion on LinkedIn. So if you could give us a quick understanding and education on how your content is going to get shared with LinkedIn, because there's also a difference between what I put as a post and even what I do is in groups, right? a lot of people will say groups have been rendered quite meaningless in LinkedIn, and maybe you can add some insight to that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Is it okay if I go back to the question of what is content and maybe how I became a part of that? Because I'm going to answer that from the context of my experience with content. Is that okay?
Perfect.
Okay, so thanks for that permission, because I'm going to take you way back to Africa. I'm going to take you on a journey to the Nigerian Biafran Civil War in the late 60s. I was a young child. Bombs are falling, right? We're hungry. Literally, millions of children are dying of starvation. And I was one of those children. And my mother and I, we were living in refugee camps and running from the war. And she couldn't feed me. She couldn't keep me from danger. And so you know what she did? She sang to me. She sang songs. And those songs did something magical to me. They made me happy. And it was from that happiness that I learned two of my life's most important lessons. The first one is that happiness can drive away fear. Happiness can drive away hunger. And happiness comes before success, not the other way around. We all know so many people who are successful and they wake up on the wrong mountain. They're not happy, right? So that was my life's first lesson. The second thing I learned is the lesson of content. And that's why I wanted to share that story. You see, what my mother did was she diverted my attention from the difficulties, the pain, the fear. And she focused me on something different, something positive, and we survived because of it. If you think of if you're taking your children on a long drive, right? And everybody's driving and the kids are asking, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Well, what do? You give them a great story. You give them a game to play. You sing songs. That content diverts their attention from their pain and their suffering of the drive and allows them to get through it. That's the same thing we do with content. With content on social media and in any selling situation, everyone is afraid to be sold. Nobody wants you to sell them anything. Stop, don't sell me. Even if you go to Best Buy and you see that salesperson coming to you, you're like, okay, I gotta get out of here. Don't sell me stuff. Don't sell me stuff. What content does is it diverts our attention from the fear of that sales process and allows us to relax. The most powerful 4 words in the English language are once upon a time. We relax. We are ready to listen and to share and to build a relationship. And that's what content marketing does on LinkedIn and elsewhere. But on LinkedIn, it's most powerful if you're B2B, okay? That's where business people are. So given that context, content marketing on LinkedIn is essentially this. Share yourself. Share your knowledge. Don't hide it. So many people are afraid to give away the nuggets in the kingdom. And it's like, hey, what am I going to have left to charge people money for? Don't worry about it. Share the best stuff you have, because that is doing the work of attracting your clients to you in the first place. You're helping people relax and come to you instead of you having to beat down all the doors and try to go to them. So use your content as a tool to get ideal clients.
Okay, I've got to push back on you. I'm sorry. And this is why, is because you said this is what content is and this is what it does and this is what it can result in. And I say, oh, that's not true. Maybe that's what the good content does. Because I would dare to say, especially when I talked about, groups, kind of being meaningless and, a lot of people not spending time in there anymore, is because it isn't good content. It is, here's buy my stuff. Here's my offer. And then, people are putting in all this activity and not getting any ROI and not understanding why, or don't care because maybe my job and my responsibility is to post. Big deal. What's the ROI on that if nobody's checking on it, right? So I think there's a significant opportunity to separate yourself from all the rest. But the problem is you're getting sucked into this vortex with all this flood of noise. And you and I have had this conversation before, and I actually did a post with an analogy about, this vortex and getting, sucked down with all the other crap. And you were like, it's a visual, but that's not very inviting, but it's true.
Yeah.
So how do we create content that's different? This goes back into how does LinkedIn work so that your content, your good content, can be seen and then therefore shared?
Yeah, no, what a wonderful question. The question of creating great content has a lot of answers. I mean, literally, there's a whole course in that. But let's just focus on a few things. Great content is content people want to voluntarily engage with. Why? Because the number one currency on LinkedIn, and frankly on any social platform, is engagement. They want people there. They don't want you going off of their platform. They want you to see their advertisements. They want people to pay for advertisements, and they want you engaged on the platform so you can experience them. So let's just start from way up there. Good content is content that people want to voluntarily engage with. Now, creating good content is not as easy as just putting out whatever you want. I'll give you some examples. If you post online and you're talking only about yourself, guess what? You might be the only one looking at that content. You have to talk about other people. I have this thing, I call it the buyer to seller continuum. If you're talking about yourself, the seller, crickets. But if you're talking about the buyer, the buyer is going to show up consistently. So that's one little tip. On your profile on LinkedIn, on the content that you share, whatever it is, consider your ideal client and be talking about them, because the psychology is if they hear that they're the ones being talked about, they show up. But if you're talking about yourself and how great you are, they're gone. That's number one. Number two is think about the algorithm of LinkedIn and other social networks. The algorithm is like a radio station. You know, I have kids, you know, Jim, you have kids, and we know how our kids come home and say, hey, Dad, Ariana Grande is the best thing in the world, right? Because Ariana Grande is on the radio station. Well, it's just the psychology. When millions of people are exposed to this show, they think that whoever's on it is like the next thing since, you know, sliced bread, right? The best thing. But the truth is, and as a musician, I know this, there are thousands and thousands of people as good as Ariana Grande, maybe even better, who are not on the radio station. But we respond psychologically to that. It's called social proof, and we are just like all over it. We will buy anything. Now, LinkedIn has an algorithm that works the same way. When LinkedIn looks at your posts and a lot of people are buzzing around it, lots of people are engaging with it, loving it, all of a sudden, the radio station meter goes up and it goes, yep, that's a good one. We're going to spread that one even further. And boom, what used to be a post you'd put out and only 3 people would see it, I like to say my best friend, my wife, and my mama, right? When it's more than 3 people, when it's like 3,000 people who see your posts, now you're cooking. And you know what that does? It earns you followers if your content is good. And the more people who follow you, I didn't say connection requests. I said followers. The more people who follow you, the more opportunities you have to be a thought leader. As they say, if you think you're a leader and you look behind and nobody's following you, you're just taking a walk.
Yeah, and I want to stop you right there because I think that's beautiful, and I want to add on to what you're saying because it's critically important. Because I had mentioned at the beginning that there was a case study where I myself had an improvement on my LinkedIn activity, my ROI. Of 726.93%. Now, what that represents is it got more shares, it got more looks, it got more comments, and that content was therefore now getting exposed to significantly more people. And here's the numbers, right? So because of that increase, that content reach was 3,637,800. That's massive. That's how many people were now possibly exposed to that content. But here's another thing to make it even more impactful. If I was to convert that or to use paid ads in order to be able to get that kind of reach, it would have cost me $15,788.
Wow.
And you know what it cost me? Now, people could possibly say it's priceless. It cost me my time. I didn't pay to have that kind of reach and a 726.93% improvement. That's massive. We're going to talk about how I did that. No, again, stay in with me here because I'm actually going to give you an opportunity to get an over-shoulder look on how I exactly accomplished that so that you can do it for yourself. And we're going to talk about that. But we want to talk a little bit more with Pelè, Dr. Pelè. That's his stage name.
Yeah, you know me too well. You got to call me Dr. Pelè. Just kidding.
because he is extremely talented in a lot of ways. And yes, his music, you can find that on the internet, and we'll talk about that in a second. Because I think for me, when I look at, the journey of where, you've come to where you are, getting into this whole, algorithm analytics. You have a book that you're currently working on right now, may already be out depending on when you listen to this. If you could talk a little bit about that book, the title and the context.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Jim. The title of the book that is almost finished is called Social Velocity. And social velocity is something I'm so passionate about because it is actually a reaction and a rebuttal and a rebellion. Wow, that's 3 R's. Dude, we're cooking today. It's a rebellion against what I call mass marketing and spammy connection requests and everybody just wanting to sell you something now. It's all about speed with these folks and with the way it works. I interviewed Seth Godin once, and he said he calls that hustling. And I've adopted the word hustling to describe speed. Now, here's the problem with speed. You can be going very fast and achieving nothing. You can be, knocking on doors and begging people to become your client all day. And it's just like being on a treadmill or a hamster wheel. That's the problem with speed. So when you think of the definition of speed versus other elements such as velocity, okay? Velocity and speed are actually very similar except for one thing. Speed has nothing to do with movement of from a place to place, from a location and direction point of view. You can be going very fast in one spot and moving nowhere. Velocity is defined as that movement in a specific direction, actually changing in location. And when I thought of that definition from physics, I was like, that's what we need to achieve on social media. That's where the name social velocity came from. In fact, going back to Seth Godin, Seth is the guy who introduced permission marketing. Why? That was his rebellion and rejection of interruption marketing, which was advertising on TV. You're watching your TV show and boom, some guy shows up and interrupts you. He introduced permission marketing and it just blew up and everybody took it over. But here's the problem. We're all doing permission marketing now. We get opt-ins. When you get the opt-in, you send them the email and you send them 5,000 emails. Brrr, you vomit. And we don't want to do that. So what I'm proposing is really the next thing, the next level after permission marketing is social velocity, where you slow down, you build relationships, you increase your reach, and you analyze your results. That's the 3 R's of social velocity. And that's what the book is all about.
Okay, and that's exactly what happened with my case study. All of those things were impacted. So with that increase, I already mentioned something about the reach, right? And also the relationships. I received more connection requests, because of that content. And so what that means for me is it's been a learning path and journey, and I'm now being able to replicate it, and it's consistent. And I think that's critically important as well, because we all, from a social perspective, get exposed to, and we think about the quick hit, hey, I'm going to go viral thing, but that's just not the way that it works. So if you can talk a little bit about growth in regards to that content component and where you see most people in regards to their content quality, because I do also think the maturation process, when you talk about Seth being permission-based, that's kind of where we now gotten into the story-based marketing, right? And you even have written about that. But if you could talk about where most people are, because this is what I see, 98% of the content that I see out there is the stuff that's causing the vortex and pulling people's good stuff down. So how do we fix that?
Yeah, no, you make a great point about people needing to just pace, slow down, get with the delayed gratification thing, because it really does make a difference. You can't ask for marriage on a first date. You really do need to pace it. Go for coffee first, right? And the way you go for coffee and the way you divert attention from the fear of selling and all that stuff is by focusing on content. Now, what is content doing? Content works only when it's consistent. If you post today and never post again for a month, and then maybe post every day for two weeks, you're destroying how content works, because content is all about building expectation with your target audience. First of all, we got to define your target audience, but that's a different part of the conversation. If you think of the Oprah Winfrey Show, it comes on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. every week. Guess what happens? Once people tune in, they're like, it's 6:30. I got to go do it. I got to get that. So consistency is a powerful thing in your content marketing strategy. Another thing is you got to count. You can't just put content out and not know what's happening to it. You've got to be able to look at that content and say, okay, here's how many people reacted to it. Here's how many people followed my content back to my website and bought something. Here's a graph that shows me what's happening over time. And here's, if I say, what's my best post ever? Click a button and there it is. That helps me make decisions so I can improve. As Peter Drucker said, you cannot improve that which you cannot measure. So counting is so important with content. Two more things I'm going to say. Conversations. Your content isn't just there to make everybody happy. It does a lot of things. It educates, it builds interest, it builds desire for your product, it even sells. But the most important thing your content is there to do is to create the opportunity for conversations. Why? Because conversations create clients. Got it? And then the last thing is community. So many people think, I got to do this all by myself. I'm like, no, you're not an island, okay? No one is an island. And what community does is it gives you a sense of, hey, wait, that person's doing pretty good. Let me learn. And then community is also for people to give you feedback. Here's what you're doing. All of these things, getting feedback from the data, analytics, and getting feedback from people, equally important. So these are some quick content ideas to get people going.
And all of those things are important for me to be able to, get that 726.93%,
which is massive.
Improvement. That is massive. I mean, you and I have been around. We've talked about this for a very long time when it comes to digital marketing. I mean, yep. Me back 20 years. I remember, building websites before Google. Hello, I'm an old guy, right? It's just amazing when I start looking at how things have just transpired. But here's the reality.
You mean you were around before there was only Google? There were other search engines like Yahoo?
Yes, Ask Jeeves and all these. I mean, there were some search engines that were really just list based and had a box. I mean, I was pre-Google. So, but however, all of that, knowledge, I mean, for me, starting in March 2020 has totally shifted. We've had 10 years of velocity happen in regards to transformation when it comes to B2B digital marketing. Now, here's the problem. 98% or more of the folks can't react to that, but they must. It's a survival thing right now.
Yeah.
So if I start, looking at, the reach, and I start thinking about, the impact, and I start having the community and all these other things, they are vitally important. The consistency is vitally important. And you have to have the structure to be able to do it. And here's the thing. It doesn't matter if you're that solopreneur, if you're an entrepreneur, that startup, you're working within an organization, you're a department team, or if you're a provider of services doing it for other people. You can learn the benefit and value of that. And here's what I also found. Things that I thought would be most successful as I've gone through and done this a couple of times. Everybody's like, hey, video. I need to do video. Video is going to be the thing that's most shared and this, that. That's not the case. That's a fallacy.
Yeah.
And then it becomes to, what's the quality of the video? There's a whole lot of factors that go into it. Like, for example, I had a friend of mine who shared a video and then they had these very, very small subtitles at the bottom. Like, okay, you trying to drive the old people like me away? Because I can't read that. So when I start thinking about all of these, it comes to me to ask the question is, what does a B2B digital marketer need to be asking themselves?
Well, I think that there are many things to ask, but I think the bottom line is, what are you doing right now that is producing the results you want? And what are you doing right now that is wasting your time and your money and your efforts? And how can you do less of that and focus more on the things that work and then bring that into a content marketing context? Why? Because content marketing truly is the future of marketing. You can't sell directly to people and really expect results like you can when you're selling indirectly. And content marketing is an indirect sales and marketing process. So I think they should be asking themselves, what's working, what's not, and how can I involve content marketing? And then when you look around, you'll see that LinkedIn is probably a great place to start. And that gets into issues of, how is your brand showing up right now on LinkedIn? And what do you need to do to build that foundation first before you put content marketing on top of it? Because I'll tell you one thing, if your foundation doesn't make sense, when you attract people to you, when they see that your website and your profile and all those things don't really make sense to giving them any value, they're gone again and you just wasted your time again. So there are a bunch of layers to that question, but I think let's start with what's working. Let's do an analysis. Let's look at the numbers and let's do more of what's working. And then let's find out what's wasting your time and money. Stop that. And then let's start thinking about content marketing.
Most definitely. And so what we've done at the B2B Digital Marketer is created a lot of resources. You'll even get access to that over-the-shoulder look on how I got that improvement of, I got to say it again because it's just so shocking to me.
726.9%.
Yeah, don't forget that. That's important because it was almost 727.
Yeah.
So to me, all you have to do is go to b2bdm.com/content marketing. So there's going to be links to this particular podcast. There's going to be links to be able to access that webinar. We're going to do it both, live and on demand. And again, it depends on when you listen and watch. And so you can see exactly how I did it. And because it follows the process that, Dr. Pelè has given me the opportunity to be able to use, and I'm learning multiple things. But one is what I thought isn't necessarily true, because here's the thing. I may be 80% right. I said I'm an old guy. I've been doing this for a long time, but the world has changed. March 2020, April 2020, I should just say it wasn't April Fool's. It was a new world.
Yeah.
And I either needed to react to it or not. And so I found so 80% of what I know, may be true, but it's the extra 20 that is really the differentiator, and it is for you too. So you need to make sure that you're staying up on things, and that data will tell you when they shift, right? So if I'm looking at what I am doing right now and what I've been doing, I think it's also important for us to really, if you can get a little bit more specific, answer the question: what should a B2B digital marketer stop doing?
Well, I would say, if you're doing, do you want me to focus on content marketing or digital marketing overall? I'm not sure.
I'll let you answer.
You just okay, wherever I want to go. Okay. I would say start way at the top and say, am I doing outbound marketing or am I doing inbound marketing, or both? If you're doing outbound marketing, that means you're advertising and so on and so on and so forth. Take a look at the return on investment on that. If you're spending thousands of dollars like we all have and waking up and getting zero results, stop it. Okay, stop it quick. Because the truth is, and I really believe in inbound marketing, because that is content marketing. Inbound marketing attracts people to you. So many of us make the mistake of only selling to the 3% who are willing to buy right now. Chet Holmes wrote a book, The Ultimate Sales Machine, I believe it's called, where he said, at any given time in a marketing or sales context, only 3% of people are willing to buy right now. There's 67% or so more people that, if you could just have some delayed gratification, slow down the speed on the hamster wheel, and just wait and just feed those people with stories and context and content over time, you could convince that 67% to come to you. Okay.
Yeah, and let's be clear. The other percent that you're not putting in there, they're never going to buy anyway.
They're never going to buy. That's like 30% are never going to buy.
Yeah. And I also want to add context to what you're saying, is because there was some statistics that came out, post-COVID statistics, that said within that search part of the buyer journey, so they're researching their solutions and options, is that the search phase has increased in activity by 130%. Now, you may sit there and say, oh, well, when COVID kind of goes away, it'll go back down 130. No, it ain't.
Yeah.
We have new behaviors in our world. So what you're saying has mass magnitude. And so we absolutely need to apply what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just to wrap up that question you asked, which is what should people stop doing and what should they start doing? Stop selling. Seriously, stop selling. I know people say always be closing, and we've heard all kinds of acronyms that talk about always selling. Stop selling and start serving. There's a difference. When you're only selling to the 3%, how much are you going to really get from that 3%? But the 67%, they don't require being sold to. They require service. And that's the difference. So I would say, number one, take a look at whether you're just doing outbound pushy stuff and see if it's working. If it's working, go for it. But if your return on investment is low, stop that. Then come on over to the inbound side where you're pulling, you're attracting people to you using content, and work harder on the 67% over time.
And I'll add on to that is, especially in B2B, there's an important thing that needs to be understood is that even when you do make a one-to-one connection, it's highly likely that that's not the person who will make the decision and then therefore pay you.
Exactly.
It's not the way. So like, even for us, it's like my CFO has to be part of the decision-making process. My CFO is also my wife.
Yeah, there you go. In my world, she's my CEO. I'm just the chief technology officer.
I hear you. So my wife is actually a CPA. So, I mean, she's on the right seat on the bus, right?
Yeah.
But I think she's like my friend John, who worked for a software company for many years. I don't know. I need to check with John. But he had both roles, CFO and CEO, because he was an accountant. So, all right. So I'm sitting here and I'm looking at what I'm currently doing and what I'm currently spending, and I'm looking at my budget, right? We're talking about that a little bit as far as what we can spend and who's the decision makers.
Yep.
If I am currently looking at what I'm currently spending, where do I need to probably take money from? And you may have already answered this, but I want to be a little bit more succinct. Where do I need to take money from and apply it to?
Well, okay. So if we're looking at shifting from outbound to inbound, that's a no-brainer, because I can tell you right now, you will be spending anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000, okay, on a social network every month if you're just advertising. And that doesn't guarantee you any customers, because you still have to do the work of conversion when you bring those the funnel, when the funnel comes to you and you have meetings. The conversion rate might not be what you're looking for. So if you're moving from $5,000 a month or $10,000 a month to a different model, as you said earlier, Jim, it's pennies on the dollar. It's literally almost nothing comparatively, right? Because for $100 a month, for example, or even half of that, you could begin a process of content marketing where you hire a team to do the content for you, even. You got to find the right people and things like that, but you could actually not have to do it yourself after a while and just pay about $100 a month and get great content that has great engagement that represents your brand working for you in the real world. Look, I like to call content marketing the development of assets, because if you stop advertising right now, guess what else stops? Your flow of business. You stop paying them money, everything stops. With content, it's the other way around. You create something once, and over time, people discover you based on it. I've had people who came to me and paid me for my courses and for my offers based on content I put out months ago. I didn't even know it was still selling me. It's kind of like the music industry, to be honest. I learned this from the fact that back in 1998, I actually had a record on Billboard magazine. Billboard chart number 29, Alexander O'Neal, go check it out. Billboard on the top R&B 100, whatever charts back in the day. And you know what, Jim? I still get checks today. 1998, this is 2021. Who wouldn't love that kind of mailbox money, right? That's content marketing. Because you can create something, a nice post, a video, a really helpful article, something that helps people, and just put it out there and people will find it. Google, LinkedIn, people will find it and they'll find you.
Well, okay. So, and again, people say content is king. They talk about that, but I don't want to discount the quality of your content. And I think I started going down this path and I didn't, really do a succinct job about it. And I will share this in my over the look on the webinar. So again, you can go to b2bdm.com/content marketing and you'll be able to get access to that. Is when I first started and I look at the quality of my content, it's kind of like people say in the podcasting world, oh, don't listen to my first 10 episodes, right? don't do that. But it's like there's a learning curve, right? And what I was creating and what I thought was quality content, I realized wasn't when I started looking at the data. Yeah. When I started looking at the engagement, when I started looking, I'm like, oh my, and then I started thank goodness, getting the opportunity to see other people whose content was being engaged with. And I was like, dang. And I started adopting those things. And lo and behold, quality content grew. It just didn't pop out.
Yeah, I agree completely. You have to be serving, as we've said. And it's easy to start by just being focused on yourself. And that doesn't work as well. You don't engage people by only talking about yourself and your products.
So if I was to say, when we look at the marketplace, we talk about the increase, in the search phase. We talk about the consistency. We talk about, quality. We talk about, all the relationship piece. When you start looking at this is essentially a formula of success. How do I equate and put in all the pieces for velocity? Is this something that I can do in a short period of time? Is it something that's going to take me months? I mean, what are we talking about here?
From a time frame point of view, you can get started within a couple of weeks and start to see serious traction on your content. But that traction does not necessarily equate to customers. You have to have a funnel. You have to have a process where people can go, okay, I like your content. I saw it once. So some consistency kicks in when they see it again and they see it again. And then they say, hey, I want to take you up on this offer you had that takes me to your website, and so on and so forth. So that there is a process. I would say, think about a 90-day process. Okay. Think about a 90-day conversion process from no content to having content that is creating clients. That would be my time frame recommendation.
I think that's a really good point. So what you're referring to in some of the tools that I provide to some of my clients and my students in digital marketing is something referred to as a convincer strategy. Now, you were talking about that 67% and the remaining will never buy from you. And, how do you look at that? And I got how many percentage on this front end? That's where convincer strategies come in. And when you're creating content, you must be able to understand that conceptually. And what that means is some people, if you give them the right information at that beginning point, they don't need to go into a whole lot of explanation. They're ready. So they're going to decide fast. Then you have a group and percentage of people that need to see it a number of times for them to say, okay, well, I've seen this, for example, 10 times, and I think I'm ready to move. And then other people are time frame people. I've been seeing this over a period of time for the last 12 months. I think I'm ready now. And then other people is that group that we had talked about that said they're never going to buy from you anyway. So don't worry. Yeah. But you do need to understand that, because I think one of the things that when you start talking about that outbound paid and that inbound content, and having the organic and all of that, those you have to have those together to have some also consistency in your revenue expectations. Yeah. And I think that's what we're really talking about is how can I, predict, what my income is going to be. And that is formulaic. And I could, really be promoting and pushing things from an ad perspective, because I'm running a campaign, but then you also need to know, yes, if it's good, I'm going to get some improvement or increase, but then it's also going to fall. How do I stabilize all of that? So when you start looking at it from an overall content strategy, and I'm mature, and I'm going to get into a situation where I'm doing, because I do advocate paid and organic. I mean, because I've heard you talk about it. If say I'm going down the path, I have my 90 days. When do I potentially infuse or input some paid components in there so I can start getting some consistencies in my revenue expectations?
That's a good question, which I think, unfortunately, is so different because of everybody's different kind of business and different kinds of customers. And it's hard to get an answer to that one without really studying each type of customer. But I would say that there is wisdom in having a marketing mix. Okay, there's wisdom in having a mix of strategies working together, but you can't make good decisions in the absence of data. Okay, and people actually have decent data on advertising, on outbound efforts. They have good data because you can just, if you're doing LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube or whatever, you can go in there and see the numbers. That's great data. But people don't have great data with inbound marketing. And traditionally, it's a strategy of hope. Throw it out there and spray and pray that somebody's going to help you. Spray and pray doesn't work. You got to have the analytics so that it's measurable and you can make decisions about it.
Okay, I do want to circle back because I think for me, I get torn a lot of times, and it goes back to that ROI component. Mm-hmm. And you talk about my own content and my own things that I post, and they're on my account, they're on my profile, versus groups. Do I need to be messing with groups? Should I be using groups? What should I use groups for? What should I expect from groups? Because some of the groups that I've been in, I've just gotten out of because it has no value.
I don't really know why LinkedIn's groups struggle so much because Facebook has developed the ability for groups to be successful and useful. People make a lot of money by creating groups of people on Facebook. In fact, there are many LinkedIn marketers and coaches and consultants who have Facebook groups for their LinkedIn activities, which is crazy. So I don't really know why LinkedIn has not built more power into their groups. So yes, I would agree with you. Groups really don't work that much on LinkedIn. But what does work though at the end of the day is your profile and your own personal posting. Why? Because, we are our brand. Like everybody talks about that. Even if you're in a big company, you are the brand of that company at the point of connection and interaction with possible customers. So make the best use of your brand by sharing useful and helpful information that changes lives and makes people want to come back and learn more about you or your company. So I think, the answer to your question would be, if I were just to boil it down, is yes, groups are struggling on LinkedIn. I wouldn't bother with them that much. Okay, but use them if you need to have a few people and you guys know for sure you're going to connect with each other. But as a business development strategy, not so much.
Pelè, I've had a fun time with you today and shared a lot of insights. And just to remind everybody, I am going to give you an over-the-shoulder look on how I actually experienced a 726.93% improvement, which would have cost me $15,788 to get that type of improvement from people looking at my content. And I used Dr. Pelé's methods. And I also have some tools that he has that I'll show you. I'll also be able to share with you the convincer strategies and several things so that you can be more effective with your LinkedIn content. But Dr. Pelè, how do folks get in touch with you?
2 places. No, actually 3. Let's make this really comprehensive. The first is if you want to just hang out and learn about, the stuff I've written. I've got 7 books, I guess, coming with Social Velocity and music and just kind of have fun. Go to drpele.com. That's drpele.com. I'm always on LinkedIn, like anyone else. So my handle is drpele after the standard linkedin.com/in/ then drpele. And then there's Velocity Jam, which is my software and a community that I have helped to build that really helps you implement content marketing on LinkedIn and YouTube and other places. There's one more thing. African Soup is at my house on Sunday nights. And Jim, you're invited again.
And I would welcome the opportunity to come back for that. It was fantastic. And one of the things for me, when I'm thinking of soup, traditional soup, I'm going to get a bowl and a spoon. That's not what it was.
No, you got to use your hands.
That's exactly right. So I will be highlighting within my over-the-shoulder look, Velocity Jam. I'm going to show you how you could do this by yourself, and I'm going to show you what Velocity Jam actually does. And if you actually want to get more details, go straight to that. You can also go and get access to all the tools in the webinar. You can go to b2bdm.com/velocityjam, and I'll show you that as well. All right, Dr. Pelè, thanks again for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and we wish you the very best.
Thank you so much, Jim. So much fun.
Thank you for joining us. Go now to join the B2B DM gang in the B2B Marketer LinkedIn group, where you can connect with other B2B DM disruptors and get access to our B2B DM cheat sheets, checklist, and guides. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, please help by going to iTunes to rate, review, and subscribe. And share the show on all of your digital platforms. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode. And always remember, you can automate your lead capture, but you must lure your lead.